Harvest. Written by Quig Shelby. Narrated by John Delino Ziegler, Jr. Chapter 1. Sorrow and distress were spreading across the city like a virus. Opioid addicts staggered around the neighborhood and littered the streets filled with threadbare hookers. Outside in the garden, the morning mist glistened on a finely spun web. I watched it vibrate, and a spider marched towards the fly that couldn't pull free. Later in the day, a mouse ate the spider before it was chased by a feral cat. We were the only ones who slept soundly, knowing that, by and large, nothing was going to eat us. But life atop the food chain doesn't guarantee happiness. When I wanted to live, life appeared fragile and fraught with danger, whilst depression left me tongue-tied and unable to move. At night, I took my poison and lay down on the sofa with a black pillow under my head, exhausted by the suffering in the world. I hoped I would never awake. The dead outnumbered the living 15-1, with many of them taken in old age, bewildered that their vigor had gone in the blink of an eye. There was a flash in the room, and my blurry eyes glimpsed 2 vanishing ghosts. I jumped up and looked at the clock. There was still enough time to make it, so I quickly showered, hurriedly packed my suitcase, and threw the empty bottle of sleeping tablets into the bin. I called the taxi and combed my hair in the mirror. There was a knock at the door, and I stepped out into the afternoon sunshine. The red and golden autumn leaves were boxing one another in the San Francisco wind. They spiraled down to earth, with the new season defeating the old. A draft swept them under the benches turned into beds by the growing numbers of homeless, as cop cars tore up the road heading for a date with an active shooter at the shopping mall. I showed the attendant my boarding pass and dragged my feet through the departure gate at San Francisco International Airport. We were herded like animals, with signs for fences. There was a plane stuck on the runway, surrounded by a SWAT team. It was an El Al flight, and a Palestinian flag flew from the cockpit window. A drug trafficker was grabbed by security and marched away. Packs of dealers and clients roamed this land, but the peddlers went to jail whilst their customers sat in boardrooms. Both abused their flesh and blood. At times, my body disgusted me. We were covered in sweat and bacteria, but that didn't stop a priest taking a shine to me on my 9th birthday. I knew what it was like to be that fly on the spider's web. First, he made me feel special and promised not to tell anyone, or they would become jealous and send him away. Later, he made me feel guilty for teasing him, causing my molestation, and I felt too dirty to share our secret. I attended Catholic school even though my mother was Jewish, whom the Romans blamed for the death of Jesus, after killing him themselves. I glanced at the newspaper stand. The Pope had canceled his trip to Washington after another assassination plot had been uncovered. The couple ahead of me in the queue, seeking attention and feigning undying love for one another, were talking loudly about their Porky Pizza restaurant before throwing the half-eaten ham and pineapple slices into the airport bin. The wife had a suntan and dyed blonde hair, with rolls of flab escaping from the top of her tight skirt. Every swollen finger was stuffed inside a gold ring bought from the murder of pigs. I was happy that porn was my wife. She always looked gorgeous, embraced my fantasies, avoided the bathroom, and never complained when I ignored her. Whereas some went to China to taste a cuisine, I tried to save the helpless dogs and cats from the cooking pot whenever I had the time. I could sense the agony of those without a voice, the sentient animals bred for slaughter. Beef cattle were murdered between the ages of 1 and 2, and pigs painfully butchered as mere units of food and wealth. A chicken glimpsed the world through a wire mesh before its head was severed on a production line. 70 billion farm animals were sacrificed each year in the name of a higher species, their screams ignored on the supermarket shelves. The meat counters needed slaughterhouse pictures to remind consumers of our barbarity. I despised all suffering. I was taught that God created the animals for the benefit of mankind, but if that meant their agonized and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?